folks who are going to be presenting. Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to get started in 1 minute here. Okay, good evening, everyone. And thank you all for joining us for a design subcommittee meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. Today's date is Tuesday, December 16th, and this is session A of the BCDC Design Subcommittee. And in case you're wondering, there is no session B this evening. My name is Seth Reisman, Deputy Director of Design Review at the Planning Department. The Planning Department continues hosting public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. Before we proceed with the agenda, I'm required by the open meeting law to notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please turn off your camera and microphone if you do not wish to be recorded. Tonight's agenda will include a presentation. For the record, the following commissioners are present this evening. Commissioner Easley, Garland, Haseen, Kim, Manfredi, Morris, Nagahiro, and Solano. An excellent full lineup this evening.
It's going to be a long night. Sorry.
Tonight's agenda will include a presentation for 275 to 279 Center Street in Jamaica Plain, otherwise known as Mildred Hailey Phase 4. Tonight's meeting proceedings will begin with a presentation from the proponent, followed by comments and discussion from the commissioners, and then an opportunity for public comments, and finally a discussion of next steps. So a proposed project at 275 to 279 Center Street, Mildred Hailey Phase 4, contemplates the demolition of one existing building and the development of approximately 191,050 square feet of residential uses, 179 units, and 64 parking spaces into two new buildings in accordance with a 121A master plan, which was previously reviewed and recommended for approval by this commission. This will be the second presentation of the proposed Phase 4 project to the Commission following its introduction at the November 5th, 2025 monthly meeting. As a reminder, Commission procedures suggest no more than 3 Commission meetings to review the project. To the project team, please note that your presentation is limited to 20 minutes. I will give you a halftime and 2-minute warning. And with that, I'll invite the project team to begin whenever ready. So we will stop sharing our screen and ask you all to share yours.
Great, thank you all. Just to do a quick sound check, can everyone hear me okay? Perfect.
Yes.
Great, we're just pulling up the presentation now. Let us know when that shows up for you.
Can see it now.
We'll see that. Perfect. Thanks, everyone. My name is Robert Smith Mendez. I'm a development project manager with the Community Builders based here in Boston. We are the developer for this project. I just want to quickly introduce our team presenting this evening. We're joined by Emmeline Glajek, who's our architect from PCA, and Amy Linsenmayer, who's our landscape architect from Ground Inc. We're super excited about this project. There was lots of discussion, lots of good discussion from our introductory BCDC meeting. And so we're really excited to share some updates that we've made to our design with you all this evening. And with that, I'll pass it off to Emmeline.
Hi there. As Robert introduced me, my name is Emmeline. I'm going to briefly just address that we are showing comments here that you've already seen from us sending it in advance from your team, BCDC, from the last meeting, BPD, BTD, and the Mildred Hailey C organization. We'll be addressing Lamartine open space and the space between 4A and 4B, the parking area. Those are the 2 main landscape areas we'll be addressing. And then the interim condition when 4A is built, And just as a reminder that we're showing you what we can control, which is the building design from Center Street and the views that we can see, and then the temporary plaza that we're proposing, but they're in control of the demolition. So we'll be in process with that, but we're addressing what we can in this meeting with you all here. And then in the building design 4A and 4B of various different comments. And with that, I will pass it off to Ground.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great. So just to update you on what has happened since we last met in terms of the landscape. So on the left-hand side, we have the plan that we presented at the last BCDC meeting. And we really, as Emily mentioned, tried to take into account all the comments that we heard from the city and community and the various stakeholders to try to improve our design and make it something that's very flexible and robust and a real asset to the community. So on the right-hand side, we have our updated site plan. And just to orient you again, we have at number 4, the shared pedestrian and bicycle path that runs north-south, and that's flanked by 2 different plazas, one at United Street and one at Center Street. That's the more civic presence of a plaza. In between, we have a variety of smaller social spaces. We expanded the lawn. That was a request that we heard. And we also were able to add a small splash pad that you can see at number 6. We sort of shrunk the amphitheater seating and path that now goes between the splash pad and Center Street Plaza to accommodate for the splash pad and the broader lawn area. The interior parking courtyard and green infrastructure are largely the same, although you'll see some adjustments to the permeable pavers, and the streetscapes on the non-parking sides of 4A and B are largely the same as you saw previously. Next slide. So this view from United Street shows 4A in the entry plaza here at United Street. And one of the comments that we heard was, is it possible to make this plaza a little bit larger? And we looked into that, but in tandem with expanding the lawn space and adding the splash pad, we're pretty restricted by the grade, which in some places is really maxed out at 4.5%. So in order to keep everything accessible and all these spaces really functional, we only have so much space for each level area to kind of accommodate. But we did try to lighten it up a little bit. We took the concrete seat walls out and added some wood seating, freestanding wood seating with benches and backs. We added some more playful components across the entirety of the park, largely in the form of large-scale boulders, and we sort of widened the planting areas a little bit here. Next slide. So here you can see that this space really does function as sort of a connector space where La Martine and United Street meet at the top of the green connector that goes down to Jackson Square Station. And so we really just wanted to create more of a porosity and lightness to this and create a connectivity between the entry of the plaza at 2 and 4A, so that they're kind of speaking to each other. Here we're at the lawn space that is looking back at the entry plaza of 4A. Next. And then sort of skipping past the expanded lawn area, and this is a view of the new splash pad that we've incorporated, and again having some of those playful boulder components and a more naturalistic lush feel to the planting. And to the left hand side, it's a little bit more of a shrunk down amphitheater secondary path area. Next. This is the updated Center Street Plaza that's largely the same, except that we added an additional planter bed to the right-hand side, and this is sort of in tandem with the plaza space adjustments at Building 2 in the southwest corridor, but still functions as sort of more of a civic plaza space. Next. So moving to the interior courtyard, we were starting to play with some different paving patterns that might be possible for the permeable paving, trying to have something that is playful and lively, but not too much, and something that also speaks to the color schemes in the facade of 4A. And we also added a few different cut-throughs through the parking lot for pedestrian usage. And this is a view of what it might look like if there were no cars there, and it became sort of a community pop-up event with food trucks and musicians, tables and chairs. It could be something, a semi-private space for the residents to use. So to speak to what might happen in the temporary condition after 4A is built, but before 4A is built, we have the plaza that's going to be part of 4B, but we definitely don't just want to have a hanging nothing there. So we came up with a concept that would provide a plaza that serves to be as an anchor point to the rest of the park. So here we're thinking about using low-cost materials, painted asphalt, and pop-up planters, and etc. And and this is just a different view further up Center Street of the temporary park on your right, and then the concealed parking with some sort of fence with the scrim on the left-hand side. That's it. Go ahead.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
And then this is just showing you how we're continuing the articulation of the metal panel all the way around the building, recognizing that this will be a prominent view of the building for many years from Center Street. So we want to continue that really nice articulation all the way around, and hiding this wall, which will be relatively hidden in the future, with a little bit of planting and brick patterning on the side here, as well as the park and screening. And we have a lot of topography as well that will be, a little bit concealing for the time being. This is a representation of the context. So on the top left, you can see that we do have some awnings as well as height along Center Street that we're responding to. Bottom left, you can see there is a 3-story brick articulation. The middle one, there's 5-story, 6-story brick articulation with an entry moment of a change of brick. And then the bottom right is meant to represent where we feel like this entry moment is too low in scale, especially such a prominent entry for our project. And we want to respond to that and really give Lamartine a special moment on Center Street. And they have a difficult grade they're also responding to. We are as well. So you can see we did some studies here in response to some of the comments. The top left is where we were before, with a 2-story full brick. And this is what we prefer on the top right, where it's lower just slightly, which we do like and feel it's more properly to scale. We also like the tall awnings and feel it's responsive to having this special moment on Center Street. And then on the flip side, you'll see another view with Lamartine being also that moment. But we played around and wanted to see what that scale would do. So if you kept the 2 stories here and lowered it down to 1 story in the center, and then 1.5, and then 1 story on the corner, and it just feels like it's making the building feel really tall on the upper stories and feels a little bit squished on the first floor. And then this is the flip side of the right hand side of looking at Lamartine Street. And you can see like we just feel it kind of unnecessarily cuts up the building. We feel that this facade is short enough that it feels okay to have the brick at one height along it, and that this maybe doesn't feel quite adequate enough for this entry. So we like that prominent moment, but like to hear your thoughts on that. And then on Lamartine 4A on the other side, I'll try and go quickly.
About halfway, Emily.
Thank you. Is it not 10 minutes?
Yes, that was the 10-minute mark.
Oh, thank you.
Keep
Okay,
going.
I'll be quick. So we have the brick prominent corner, and we think that's a nice moment that's in the neighborhood throughout and in Mildred Hailey's master plan. It's a common occurrence, and it really provides that nice entry moment of the residents. So we wanted to keep that, and then we added a little bit of cornice at the top. We also added a brick flight band and band in the metal panel at the 5th story, which we think helps break up the scale just slightly. We responded to the dark contrast comments, and we really do appreciate those comments. We feel this palette is much nicer. The building feels much brighter. and reflective of the neighborhood. Especially, there's a lot of deep reds and browns, so we feel like this is a nice balance of the neighborhood of across the street. And then we have these kind of slots that break up the cornice, and we think also the scale of the building. This is just giving you some more contextual comments, views. And I like this view a lot. It just is nice to see the brick at 5 stories, us going down to 2, 3 across the street, and then 1 in 4A. It just feels like a very nice, playful reflection of the brick kind of playing with scale and not keeping it a consistent height across. And that's that main entry. Ask for courtyard views just to show you the articulation continues all the way around. We have the brick continuing around. And I will end it there. Great, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for such a concise presentation. Commissioners, I will turn it over to you, please.
So commissioners, if you have any comments, you can raise your digital hand and we can take everyone.
Could you just go back to a site plan just so we could talk to? Thank you.
There we go.
Mick Young, did you want to make any comments, or you just
No,
wanted to
I'm
look
just
at
going to
this
let
one?
others.
Okay,
I felt it was helpful just to see the
Okay.
structure.
I can dive in first. I don't see any other hands right now. I appreciate the work you've done. I think we talked a lot about, this is a great slide to be on, where we're looking at that moment 11. I know we talked about the fact that there are certain thresholds that BHA has for parking, and the idea that you're thinking about it as a event space, that center courtyard as both parking and event space, seems like a really nice idea. I hope it could be carried out in that way, because I think it could be a really wonderful space to have these kind of neighborhood wide. I would just continue to encourage you to be thinking about even the parking that's outside the courtyard, and if there's any wiggle room there to add more open space in, that would, to kind of map left, I think that would be really great. I wanted to look at, it was either slide 13 or 14. Yes, this one, thank you, slide 14. Thanks for showing us the comparison. I am really kind of gravitating toward what I'm going to call option C, which is that second one from it's basically the bottom left. And I'm wondering if you, instead of having the awnings, and because you have a grade change, those awnings themselves step down the sidewalk, if you had looked at having something that's a little bit more contemporary and had the awning actually integrated into the architecture itself. I like the pronounced corner. You talked about it in the slide before as having that as a precedent, that you are marking that corner, which feels really good to me. And then I'm just thinking about that marked corner stepping down to that first floor plus, but where we're seeing that shadow line, could that actually become an awning or some kind of an awning cornice that maybe takes the busyness of the yellow awnings that we're seeing and streamlines those a little bit more in a more elegant way, and understanding you'd need to step that down as the topography changes. So that's one thought. And then on slide 16, at this view, I just wanted to compliment you as we're looking at the inset, which is what we saw last time, and then this new idea down below. The top idea did look very, I think the word was stripey, and now it feels a lot more integrated, where in fact your eye continues to focus on that corner element and also almost the podium, that first floor. And then the kind of remaining materials seem to complement those. So I think that this has worked really well. This was a really good test and a successful test, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
just to address your awning comment, we did, and through cost exercises, it just became clear that it wasn't going to be very feasible to be able to do it across all the retail facades. So we chose strategic moments at our main entry points, both at the corner and then at the back inner courtyard area. And then going back here, you can see we also are doing an entry hard canopy. So we kept the fabric awnings. We do like them as well. We think they provide a moment when retail can bring in individuality, but it was really a cost.
Okay. Or maybe there's a way they can be lifted a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like it's crowding the sidewalk, and it's hard to tell because the image is small, but looking at the kind of pedestrian scale there, it feels kind of low. So just something to think about as you're continuing to work on that. Jonathan, I see your hand.
Yes, thanks. And this is a great slide to segue into some of my thoughts. I appreciate the study that you put forth with the context showing, I think just before this. But I'm with, yes, this one. I'm with Linda with the, I'll call it option C or lower left, because the site that you're on seems to be needing to do a couple of things at once. And I think the podium study is really evidence that they're, in my mind, it's not really a one size fits all. In other words, what you have at the left corner of the image, I think works very well for the left corner of the image. But then by the time you get to the right, the podium relationship and how it correlates with neighboring architecture and seeming to want to have that response being lower as you're stepping really seems to make sense and draw from the expression that's already in the neighborhood. So I'm very much a fan of, and I think topographically, as you're coming up Center Street, the grade is climbing, and so this stepped quality seems to really be a natural fit with how the landscape and how the built structure is currently working. I also see a host of improvements to the facade in general from the last round in terms of just color, detail refinement, the way that you've treated the corners. It seems like a lot of things have simplified in a positive direction. And I just applaud you for doing that, mainly with really both buildings, but namely here with 4B showing that in the context. And if you could just flip to slide 4, I think is it where's this one with 4A. I really like this corner piece. I remember the last time it was rather stripy. I think the change in contrast has helped a lot. I would encourage you to go even further and perhaps without the cooler gray breaks that you have going down the, I'll call it limestone color facade, because there's something really nice at the corner. Obviously, you broke the color contrast for the corner, but just the way the composition works, where there's a horizontal member that still allows there to be a cornice, and then you really get the read of the punch windows. I could see that language continuing over as opposed to the, I'll call it bay quality, going all the way up and interrupting the cornice. It's just detail refinement, and it's really subjective, honestly. But I think you're really onto something with it, and I encourage you to continue. But I do like what you've come back with.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Commissioners, any other comments?
I can't raise my hand. I mean, like
We
digitally.
see you, McEwen.
I thank you. I also think that there've been real improvements to the landscape plan and simplifications, which I really appreciate. I like both the simplification, but also the flexibility that's been integrated into the plan. I think that's really nice. And I also, within that, like how they've been integrated into this like smaller enclaves of different kinds of experiences that are more specifically shown, like the splash pad and these other elements. I think it's going to make for a really nice kind of backyard for this residential use. So I think it's just come a really long way. I have a small thing that I just want to bring up. Linda kind of brought it up first with the parking lot. I really love the idea that the parking lot could transform on the weekends into a kind of pop-up space. But you might want to consider using darker materials. The rendering shows white, and I'm sure you all know this with oil spillage and stuff from the cars. You'd probably want it to, but I do really like the idea that you use a kind of patchwork of different kinds of paving patterns to make something like really playful and fun. It's a really nice idea. So I feel really confident with this new plan. So thank you for all the work you've put into this.
And actually, Commissioner, if I could ask a point of clarification for the project team, is this intended to be pervious paving or
Yes.
not?
That's great too. Yeah.
Thank you, Mick Young. David Nagahiro, and then David Manfredi.
So quick question, can you go through the materiality for each of the buildings?
Or I might go to the elevations. So they're largely metal panel, almost entirely, and they have composite metal details at the bands. So this has variations of panels in various widths of exposure along to try and highlight the bay articulation, but in a subtle way. And then we switched to a red metal panel, which actually is like a nod to 4B, but it's at the main entry in the inner of the courtyard. And then at the corner and the ground floor of 4A, that's where we are doing the brick that then climbs up the corner, and then composite metal band that separates the two, with then that hard trellis canopy that's the entry point of 4A. And then at 4B, similarly, but the brick goes up a little higher and wraps like a strong base and doesn't climb up. And then has some composite metal detailing in between at the windows as well. And you can just see that wraps all the way around. Kind of, we like the approach of a very simple patterning the whole way around the building. But then this one also has a subtle color change at the top floor to break down the mass. And as well as we do have some Juliet balconies on our main pedestrian thoroughfares to help the scale feel more residential.
So is the red metal panel in this above the second floor?
Yes, the red and the kind of gray bronze, those are both metal panel.
And are those, do you have a vertical expression on that?
Yes, I think I believe we have an articulation in the appendix. Oh, no, we do not, but I can zoom in here for you a little bit. So it's primarily vertical on 4B and then horizontal mostly on 4A. And they're using the same exposures, just in a different way.
Is this like is it a corrugated type of?
Exactly, it's a Morin at the moment.
Morin? Okay. Right.
We're still kind of studying which ones will be successful.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps.
And so the vertical, if you go to the vertical one, on the 4B. Yeah, one of the questions on the detail, I do like it, as Linda and Jonathan had mentioned, the stepping I think is nice to kind of break it up. I think that proportion was of the 2 stories and the 4 and the 1. I think the proportions are nicer with the 5 in between as it steps down. It kind of elongates the facade a bit. The thing about the Morin, just a heads up, is just the detailing of the length of the panel. And you're going to get a horizontal in there. So just trying to think about, how that makes that additional line in the facade, if you want to really express that verticality. I was wondering whether it made more sense to go horizontal with it, but with the corrugation, it may make more sense vertical.
Yeah, I think we incorporated it. Yeah, it depends on what height the brick was, but here there's a slight detail at the horizontal that we're incorporating in when we have to break it up. We're hoping to only have to do it once with the length, but still working with Maureen on that.
And you're going to get, what kind of setback of the window are you going to get off of the mooring?
It depends on the width of the panel. I believe it will be about 4 inches though to get in line with the sheathing to be a flange face.
Okay.
So that'll get us a pretty nice depth because we're trying to play with different depths here and then different layers underneath to push those out more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
we'll definitely refine that with the energy model as well to see what we get, what's better.
Thank you, David. David Manfredi?
Yeah, I will just, I'll be the fourth to say, I think this vertical organization is the best of your 4 alternatives for all the reasons that Linda, John, and David have already said. I think it's actually very, very well thought out in how the building meets the grade and how the stepping corresponds to the street. You've done some really nice things here, and really important improvements to where you were. I think what you're doing with the panels, also, I didn't realize those were metal panels. I was going to ask you the question David asked. I thought that was brick. I liked what you're doing with the panels. You've got different types of panels. I mean, different dimensions of panels, but you've got very nice restraint in color and the very subtle manipulation of the vertical and the horizontal, sometimes in the same building or in the same facade, other times manipulating them from building to building. I think I really like the improvements. I think you've done a really nice job, and congratulate you on refinements that will elevate this to a higher level of design that I congratulate you for.
Thanks, David. Laura, I see your hand up.
I wanted to talk about 2 things. One is the linear park, and then I wanted to talk about the interim conditions. So if we could go to the plan and perspectives of the linear park. Actually, it's probably easiest to talk over the perspectives, if you don't mind. And by the way, thank you. You did a huge number of new perspectives, and that's really helped quite a bit. I think generally that the moves that were made are really strong. One thing I wanted to talk about is the boulders, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you chose, like, why boulders and why in the forms that they're shown here.
So I think that it's something that kind of brings a softness and a contrast and a playfulness without it being sort of, sculpted concrete or metal. It can be a little bit flexible in terms of if it's used for seating. They also function to kind of direct the flow of traffic. Like here, we use them to try to help filter people down through the central path instead of cutting across the planted areas. And then similarly at the splash pad, it's something just feels sort of more of a natural space, which is something that you don't get in the city. The actual sizes and shapes would be dependent on what we could get, but at the same time, just kind of like you can sculpt with it, and there's a little bit of irregularity while still having a feeling of enclosure and heft to it. I just think that it fits well in a number of different contexts and kind of creates a design language as well throughout the site. So I don't know if that helps.
It does help, thank you. And I think it's a really smart idea to introduce a different material like this, because you know, urban settings can feel really stiff, and I do think that there's a playfulness about this. I would ask whether or not this is the right form of stone. And the reason I say that is because of the urbanity of the space. And I'm going to check with Linda. Linda, I can draw, right?
Of course.
I've been batted back once or twice. So I'm wondering, instead of these round boulders, whether or not you should do some irregular blocks. And the reason I'm suggesting this is that they do give a little more opportunity to start to make spaces where people can sit and face in different directions, versus this where everybody's kind of facing forward. And I think that having that, you know, language kind of at the top and then in the lawn and then in the play area is really lovely. It's a very smart idea, and you haven't overdone it, which I like. But you might think about whether or not that's the right form of material. And the other reason I say that is some of these, like in cities, I think it's like every space, every surface, right, can serve as a place to sit, right? And these are buildings with a lot of people in them, and it's a very dense neighborhood. And I think that the more chances you can give for people to gather in those kinds of spaces, the better. And then could you go to the perspective that's from Center Street?
Oh, wait, sorry. This one?
Yeah, and you know, I wonder if you shouldn't add some stone to this area, you know, whether it's the, you know, flatter boulders or whether it's more blocky material. But I think it would be nice to kind of have this tumble over. It's almost like a kind of terracing in a fountain, or terracing in the landscape, where you can give a little more character to this. Like, for instance, you've, you know, changed to this pretty you know, dimension stone there. And I wonder if it wouldn't be better to just have a little more playfulness there. Like, you could imagine, you know, making, let me see, I'm trying to clear. You know, maybe this could end up being a space that, you know, has more chances for seating, particularly on this public side. That's a really big space, and it's, you know, people watching in the city is just fascinating. And so I think that the more you can do that, the better. So those are my comments generally. Otherwise, I think you made some really smart moves, and probably like to have a bigger discussion on the interim condition. Yeah, that one's great. So this is a little different. This is a shade structure that would be built.
It's something that that we're thinking about if it was low cost, that we could have as a temporary component, potentially.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of interesting. On one hand, you could say, well, this space bleeds out too much into that location, but I wonder if you couldn't do something with the topography where this is raised a little bit more, so that you have sort of this cross section that goes like this out to the plaza, so that this is higher than what you're showing now. And it's actually kind of a formed slope so that it stops. Oh, I should say this is the section. So that it kind of holds that end of the space. And maybe you can kind of dot some trees in there or something, but I feel like the front fills out just a little too much, but I also don't want to see anything like a evergreen hedge or, you know, anything that I think detracts from making this feel like a whole space, which, you know, as an interim condition could be nice, but I think it might be worth the investment on that edge to think about maybe doing something with the topography, you know, overlaid by, you know, trees, and they could be, you know, small, large shrubs. So it's not too much of an investment. And I'll just throw out, you know, sort of the scale of like witch hazel, you know, where you can still kind of see through them, but you know, they add something in the seasons, but so that's kind of my comment there. I get that you don't want to spend a lot of money here, that you also don't want to make a space, frankly, that people get too attached to and are upset when the building has to go in. And so I think that it's important to just do something subtle, but really hold that space and make it feel like it's bigger than it is. And that's really it.
Okay, thank you. Those are all good points.
Thank you, Laura. David Haseen?
Thank you, Linda. I was really curious to listen to all the commissioner comments, and I must say I agree with all of them. I really appreciate the presentation, and I agree with everyone that a lot of progress has been made. I too, you know, I'm very sensitive to the opinion of the folks who've worked so closely on the project, but I have to admit that I too like the stepped base. If you don't mind going to that image for a moment. I think I like it in part because I think of that part of town as having a lot of life and incremental architecture. And the buildings that this is replacing are quite monolithic. And so there's a looseness and a aggregated quality to the buildings that the stepped base creates. For that same reason, I also like the cloth awnings, in part because I think that they will probably not all be yellow. They will probably represent, you know, different tendencies, and that feels to me a lot like Center Street, you know, like the character and scale of the street. My only comment on the building, so again, I'm with Linda on the lower left version. I think that, you know, given that that wasn't your preferred and you've probably spent a lot of time thinking about the other, I do think that the seams between the steps, which hit the ground, are something to study maybe a little bit further relative to the field, right? You know, there's sort of the field of facade with the pattern of windows and French balconies, and those show up in the seam, but they're one step higher, but they're then one step lower at the one below. And, you know, maybe that's fine. Maybe it's okay for the architecture to remain, you know, strong and consistent across that facade. But I think that you're setting up a bit of an incremental stepping in the facade, and those joint moments might be an opportunity to explore a slightly different expression, or maybe there aren't French balconies there, or they align or don't align. So just something to, it's a detail, but something to look at. I think that I very much appreciate on the other building. I was not someone who dislike the stripiness, if you will, of it. But I think that you have navigated that very nicely by maintaining the vertical rhythm, and then with the introduction of those cornice moments and those bands, it just feels very locked in and into the neighborhood, and just offers a little bit more detail. So I think that that's a big success in terms of the evolution. So I think I'll defer to my landscape colleagues on their comments relative to the landscape. So I think you've done great work, and I very much appreciate the fact that you gave us an opportunity to look at options that you were considering. Not everyone does that, and I hope you're open to the sort of enthusiasm that exists for, one of the versions that you've developed here. I do think I understand your concern about the height that's expressed of the building from the one story, but I don't know. I think that can be okay. And I think that, again, I come back to that issue of the seams. Maybe if those panels of red material are understood to be stepping as well as they come down the street, that may mitigate that concern. So all in all, I think really nice, and that's it.
Linda, I'm wondering if I could pick up from a comment Laura made about the stone, if no one else has any comments.
Yeah, do you wanna have that perspective brought back up?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a really good point, Laura, and it's reminded me how hard it is to achieve this. So I think, Laura, you brought up a good solution. If you prefer, Amy, if your team prefers to go with a more biophilic approach and have more naturalistic stones, it is hard to achieve because you are waiting till you get to the quarry and see what's there, what's available. You're not going to have the budget to hand carve stones. And so I would just say, as a commission, maybe we just say that this team works with staff to commit to some notion of a kind of natural stone language that has a kind of, rough condition, and that it's really part of the process of overseeing the project. Because I do worry, like early on in my career, we would do these drawings like this, and then you'd get these tiny little boulders if you lift it up to the contractors, and you know this, Amy. And so we know you won't do that, but I think that would be something, because it does feel like a really big character piece of the landscape, that you would want to make sure that you're achieving what you want, especially for this population who's really going to benefit from this place. So that's my only point. And anti-skateboarding. But I just want to say that because you've got a lot of like long bench surfaces, and you've got this whole residential population there. So please just watch for that. It's an easy solution.
And thank you for saying that, Mick Young, because the lines that I drew were more about rhythm, and I think it could be done with natural stone, and I think it could be done with blocky stone, either one.
Yeah, I think the blocky stone is more of a sure thing, because you know what you're getting, you know how they're cutting it from the quarry, and then the natural stone is more of a risk, but also is possible. I've seen it done. So as you're going through your construction process and value engineering and everything like that, I would advocate for, if you can't afford all the stone everywhere, just make sure you have it here. Tanner Fountain, right? It's one of my favorite places in the whole Boston metropolitan area. So I think this could be, a gift to this community.
Hey there, landscape architects. Do you ever mix them?
Mix the blocky with the natural?
Yeah.
Oh, that's tricky.
Yeah.
Oh, Laura, you have? Okay.
Just asking. Just asking.
It is tricky, but
It's
You know.
tricky. You just go to the quarry and you're picking stones. That's really what you're doing here. And so
Well, you're
I think
tagging
just,
stones,
yeah,
right? Like you tag trees.
you tag, right. And so often you're selecting things that are remainder pieces, and they're the interesting pieces, but I don't know how staff would oversee this. We just want to make sure as a commission, I think this is, Laura, what you were saying is that you get something like this and you're not ending up with something that looks a little rustic.
I like the suggestion that Amy and Emmeline and other would have a position on it, right? That this is what we want to achieve, and there will be some variation in it depending on what we find. But I like that idea.
Right. Or are they reclaimed stones?
Yeah.
There's plenty of places where you could pick these things up. So there's a lot of beautiful narratives that this brings up.
Commissioners, any other comments? I think this is going to be our last subcommittee where we invite in-person public comment. So that's something to kind of note. And Seth, I'll turn it over to you to see if there are any public comment.
Thank you, Linda. A reminder that starting January 1st, 2026, the Commission will limit live public commentary to a project's introduction. Members of the public interested in submitting comments to the Commission are encouraged to do so in writing by emailing them to bcdc@boston.gov at any phase of the project's review. However, until then, this evening, we will continue to take live public commentary. So at this time, we invite any members of the public in attendance who wish to contribute public comments to raise your digital hand, and I will call on you. If you are calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep comments to 2 minutes. Okay. I am not seeing any. Actually, I am. Allison Platinas, can you unmute yourself? Allison, if you're there, we're not hearing you yet. You should have the ability to unmute.
Oh, there I am. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Seth. Related to the splash pad and the rocks, I do remember from the public meeting, people, families would be sitting there, and families need different kinds of seating, benches with backs and armrests, as well as simple rocks. So just a thought about that. And right down the street from this site on Terrace Street, the Mayor's Office of Housing is doing a project where there are a lot of reclaimed granite boulders that they have to move, the Terrace Parker Street project. So the city of Boston has their own quarry site in one sense, because they will have an inventory of granite blocks. I am wondering about the interim space and how long that process is going to be before 4B is built, and how I don't know, a lawn. It seems kind of complicated about approving 4B now and how long it actually might be before it gets built. But thank you for letting me comment tonight. Thanks.
So sorry.
I was going to ask if either Robert or Emmeline wanted to respond to Allison.
Yeah, in terms of how long the interim condition will remain is up in the air. Our current schedule assumptions, right, are that, assuming building 4A gets awarded by the city and state next summer, then that building would start construction. We're targeting May 2027, right, and finish in about 18 months. That'll put us in, right, late, 2029-ish, just about. We expect 4B to close and start construction sometime in 2029 after, receiving a 2028 funding award. So that could mean, that there's an interim condition of, and this is in an ideal world, that the interim condition, period can last roughly 6 to 12 months between 4A finishing and 4B breaking ground. But again, it could be longer than that, kind of depending on how the funding cycles go for these two buildings.
And we typically don't take more than one public comment per person, but Allison, since you were very efficient and got your comment in under the 2 minutes, if you have another 40 seconds, if you'd like to ask a clarifying question.
Well, thank you. And I forgot to ask this before, but I thought there was a question about the takedown of the mature trees on the site, and I didn't see a slide about that. Was that presented earlier?
So
how many trees are being taken down on the site?
So we did not present on that in this round. We did mention it in the community round. We are going to, in the interim condition, we're hoping to hold on to 4 of the largest mature trees, which will be a real benefit. And I need to double check about the number that are going to come down. We have 21 trees, yeah. So, and we're replacing 45 trees, so.
And I'll just say, for more added context, that there is an existing building that's there on the site. It's an existing public housing building owned by the BHA. That building will be demolished before TCB even steps onto the site to start construction.
Right.
The BHA, and they're looking to JP&DC to manage the demolition of that building. That's outside of our control at this point. So kind of depending on how that demolition goes, what some of the post conditions of the site will be left for when we step onto the site. So there are variables there that we have to work through. And we're in constant coordination. TCB is in constant coordination with our co-developers in the Boston Housing Authority. So closer to the time of when that building will be demolished, they'll be seeking out a GC. They'll come up with a construction management plan where we can better learn from their team what their plans are for preserving trees as they take that building down.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any public commentary? Seeing no more hands raised, I will close the public comment period and turn it back to commissioners for thoughts on next steps.
Thank you, Seth. I think this is a really well-prepared presentation, and appreciate that you took all of our questions into account, and also that you correlated those with some of the public comments you've been receiving along the way. That was really helpful to see show up in that first slide. Commissioners, I think this is a project that is slated just for one subcommittee. I feel like we had a really productive conversation. Do we feel like it's ready to move to a vote at full commission?
I do.
Great.
Yes.
All right, so I think those are our recommended next steps, Seth.
Okay, so it is my understanding that the project is recommended for final consideration and recommendation by full commission. There are no provisos at this meeting because there's no vote occurring. But I think the proponent heard a lot of good feedback and some suggestions for further exploration to come back to full commission with. So we thank the proponent. Looking forward to seeing you at a full commission soon, and would like to thank the commissioners for their time as always, and particularly as this is our last meeting of the year. And on a high note here, thank you for all your dedication, time. It's been a heck of a year, and 2026 is going to be an interesting one as well. And we'll be back. Staff will be back before you in either January, more likely February, with a sort of roundup of 2025, a little retrospective, some of the research, right, continuing the data that we had accumulated right before we started some of the BCDC reform efforts, so we can see how that played out over 2025 and look into the future for that. And
Thank
so
you.
I
Thank
think
you
with
so-
that, unless
Yeah.
anybody has anything else,
Just to
we're
wish
done for the
everyone
evening.
happy
Yeah.
holidays
Happy
for
New
people
Year.
that
New
Happy
Year's,
holidays.
are
everybody.
celebrating this year and
Thank you.
or
See
this
you
week
in the
and
new
next.
year.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good
Thank you
evening.
so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.